as you do this, so that, when you come back later, think in these terms. Well, if I put this down and came back 6 months later, would I have enough data in there really to continue on? See, when you research this stuff, don't bother to put the information down. At some point, you're going to kick yourself. I've done it. It's not a good thing.
Yeah, I've already done that too.
Yeah. So I put that down, and don't worry about. Gee, I might have not investigated some aspect, and I might conclude differently at a later time. So what? You can always change it. But you might say to yourself, well, gee, this whole issue with say authorship needs to really be nailed down. Well, does it need to be nailed down for the purpose of what you're doing here, or maybe it needs to be really nailed down if you're going to do the whole book. Maybe you need to do it right off, make sure to get it all done. But keep focused what you're trying to do. You're trying to come up with an interpretation of this section right here, either because you're going to preach from it, or because somebody asks you what in the world is this all about, or if there's theological dimensions to it that are causing people problems. You've got to figure it out. Sometimes you don't need to know all the history to be able to do that. Okay, so now you think we're ready to go on to the foundational stuff, huh, Robert?
I think so. I think we've got a pretty good idea.
What's your approach to it?
As far as what next?
Yeah. How you going to go about it?
Finishing it up here, but I like how in the last class, how we went through and just started doing the syntax and grammar, word study on each word, and put that together.
So what's involved in the foundational stuff?
Here said you have textual criticism, word studies, quotations.
Actually, those are the frequent steps, aren't they?
Are they?
Frequent steps. So you don't do it in every word, right?
Oh, well, okay, yeah.
The foundation, we're integrating foundation and frequent.
Right.
What are the foundational steps? The difference is what? This is what you do with every word, foundational. This is what you do every now and then, frequent.
So your syntax study would be foundational. And go into here.
Well, that's part of it anyway, right? What else is involved?
Let's see. I think, term analysis.
Term analysis and what else?
Kind of keeps that in there. Term analysis, diagramming.
As we were doing the whole book, it'd be summary.
Yeah.
But we're not doing the whole book. Term analysis and diagramming, at least, right? Okay. And when we do term analysis, we integrate those other frequent steps, right? My question to you, though, is how do you normally approach the two foundational steps we're talking about, diagramming and term analysis?
When I did that Philippians thing, I found that I did them simultaneous almost, where I would do a verse full of the term analysis for each word, and let's see. Actually, I just imported the verses into the Lebron's diagram, and I would rough it out, and then as I did my term analysis, that would change things.
You rough out the diagram,
yeah,
and you do your term analysis and fill around.
One verse at a time, and then the term analysis would would cause me to change things.
Yeah,
I say,
sure.
oh, this doesn't. You look at this. I mean, the biggest thing there is the syntax, to help put the pieces.
Yeah. So they need to be done together.
Yeah, that's what
So your approach is to rough out a diagram and then work on the other and adjust it as you go along.
But I didn't do. I roughed out the diagram for one verse, and then I do term analysis, and then I would rough it out. And I'm not sure if that was just the way I like that pretty well. I'm not sure if that was the best way or not, but it worked.
What about you, Mike?
I have to. I sort of side with Mark because I'm strongly tempted to diagram things because I'm kind of visual and I like to see the canvases put together. But I find there's it's a little on the tedious side to me, but what really helps is to just go ahead and sit down and do the term analysis first. Do that in a relatively thorough manner, and that way all your parts of speech have been genuinely identified as far as what they are, and that helps to guide the diagrammatical analysis. Hopefully that will shape properly the first time.
So I'm trying to figure out, so you're doing the term analysis first and then you're doing a diagram, or you do a diagram and then...
Terms first and then diagram.
Oh, okay.
Diagram off of that.
Yeah. How about you, Robert? How do you like to approach things?
I think that's probably how I do it. Yeah, go through and make sure I have all the term analysis kind of nailed it, and then put that diagram together. I'm just starting to kind of get into the diagram. So I've got just got little drawings, but just this week, so yeah, I'm just gonna start play around with which one I got. Gold.
Oh, you got the... Wow.
Yeah.
Gold. I'm jealous.
I had to literally take out a loan for it, but I figured if I'm going to do it, I want to get it.
That's good. I'm glad.
It doesn't come with baggy.
Huh?
The gold, for retail price $1,300, it doesn't come with baggy.
Doesn't it come with original languages?
It's got tons of stuff except for
but not baggy. Or the BDB, does it? The Hebrew?
Yeah, it has to be.
Yeah.
Did that come with it? I couldn't remember if I had to buy myself or not.
Yeah.
But I know I had to buy it.
I didn't buy that. I bought the biblical language.
Yeah. Did BDB come with that one? Okay.
And what bugs me is when you look at the Brownics website, I saw this one reference page that lists all the Greek resources available. They don't sell that as a bundle.
Well, you can click on the thing that shows you which, there's
a comparison chart.
Yeah, there's a chart that shows each one.
Show you what happened and what doesn't happen.
Yeah, I'm going to have to search a little more, but I think we really sell that. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I'll be working more with diagrams.
One of the things I wanted to mention, sometimes you diagram first, sometimes you do term analysis. If you can, when you get where you can read the text well, okay, then you pretty much have a good feel for the parts of speech that are involved in the cases and everything, and the general feel for able to diagram it without having to do all the term analysis first. If you're struggling with the reading of it, then maybe you need to do the term analysis first so you can kind of nail that down a little bit before you can get after it. But either way is fine, but the bottom line is you got to coordinate. You can't do term analysis and figure out you got an adverbial participle and then all of a sudden the diagram shows that it's an adjective. That isn't going to work. Somehow it's got to coordinate. Okay? So I kind of like to personally. I just kind of like to diagram the thing first, and then work on the term analysis and going back and forth and changing and adjusting things along the way. sometimes adjustment goes the other way too. The diagram forces you to rethink your term analysis. So I don't think there's any one better way. In other words, what needs to come first. I think the bottom line is they just need to coordinate, make sure they are in agreement. So you can figure that out. So did anybody do a diagram? And that's one of the things we want to emphasize this semester. Have you tried to do a diagram with it at all?
Not this first.
This section, have you done it?
I haven't.
Yeah, I got a diagram up here. That should sit there. Yeah, okay. This is just one section up. One section up. Yeah, quite a few. We're all set on 15. Oh, no, it goes all the way down to 18 through, what is this? 18 to 20, and then 21 and 22. I got another diagram, but I don't know if you can see this or not. But let me just explain my diagram, not that it's perfect, not that you would have to agree with it or anything, but can you see it okay? I could make it a little bigger, but then if I made it bigger, it might be a lot better.
You probably back the
What's that?
projector up a little bit.
Yeah, right. Let's see what happens if I make it
On that
a little better.
Yeah.
That's okay. Let me just walk through it. Now, I don't know. I don't use all the diagrammatical things in the Wydronics. The little, the marks and stuff. I like my own system a little better than that, but and there's enough of that in the Wydronics that I can use, but I find some of it I don't use at all. First thing I have to do, and I wasn't able to do this right off, is where does this connect? It's obviously a subordinate clause, and where does it connect? Well, when I worked through stuff, I ultimately connected it up with verse 17, an explanation of why it's better to suffer for doing good. Okay? But anyway, getting into the diagram here, and then Christ suffered once for all, also concerning sins, that he might bring you to God, etc. Then this righteous for the unrighteous, that kind of cropped up. In fact, when I first did this, I had it different, and then I was working through the term analysis, wait a minute, how does that fit? Where does that fit here? It's not the subject. Well, it is the subject, isn't it? I mean, it's
referring back to
Christ. Yeah, it seemed to me to be appositional to Christ. That Christ is the righteous for the unrighteous. And so I put that's my brackets for appositional statement there. And that's how I got that later on. And then after it follows, it's not too far here. Suffered righteous for the bringing to God. On the one hand, having put to death in the flesh. On the other hand, having made life in the spirit. Then there's that verse 19. The only connection between that and the context is through the relative pronoun. So that's where that connects. And I then had to figure out what the antecedent was. I took it back to the spirit at this point. Okay. And let's see what else. Oh, then you notice here is an interpretive issue here. Is how to deal with that word right here. I took that to be appositional. That's similar to what you were saying, asking earlier when we were translating. This article going with both. That's what you said. I'm not so sure the article itself goes with both. Right. But to figure out the dative aspect of this, how come the dative is stuck up in there? I took that as appositional. And that means that this obviously refers to people. This is spirits, but what's the relationship here? So that's going to have to do with word study and something that needs to be done there, right? Okay. Spirits in prison, are they really people or what? Disobedience, and then adverbial modifiers here. Formerly, when I took this formerly and when, and really is a restatement of this. We're going to meet one of those others, but pretty standard here. Long suffering of God being the subject, waited when in the days of Noah, while he was building the ark, genitive absolute down there. Okay. Genitive absolute while he was building the ark. Again, this relative clause being the only connection to the context there, into which few were saved, that is, 8 souls. Appositional here to souls, or few. And originally, you see, I had souls being the noun. I would have that as a subject, and then when I tried to put everything together, it just didn't work. So I had to realize, this whole thing is appositional to that. Okay? And then I took this connection, that's where verse 21 begins, and that's why I just put that there, so I know where my outline was going, my diagram was going when I got to the next section. Okay? And so then this relative pronoun refers back to water. Okay? That's how I'm taking that. So, and my next section will be way down the line here somewhere. Gee, there must be something more that we need to do. So I always try to connect all my diagrams up to one another so you got a complete running thing. So that's why I'm going to take this back to verse 20 again here. Through water, which, then I got this, which saves, that becomes a subject, but then this becomes appositional to it, where it's laid out, and that's not the way I had it initially thought through, but then when I try to put it all together, it's the only way it seemed to work. Okay, which saves you now, and you have to deal with this, how that functions verbally. And then over here, to modify the baptism here aspect of what's going on. And I found, at least it appeared, that, baptism, I'm missing that again here. I'm trying to get that in. There we go. Appeared, that appositional to that, but then it appears also that this word right here really, in a sense, takes the place of that. Okay? Which, as I worked through the whole thing, I came to the conclusion, which you may or may not agree with, is that this diagram, in a sense, really, in a strong way, helped solve the problem of how baptism saves. Because baptism really is reinterpreted in my interpretation as I work through it as this here. Okay? So it becomes an appositional statement to that, which makes a different kind of a whole thought here. But anyway, that's really, and then I've got this down here, this business here of this genitive absolute, and when I have a genitive absolute, I just go ahead and put the subjects, which are in the genitive case, in the genitive slot, while I confuse the issue by creating a whole new kind of diagram. So subject, verbal idea, right? And there's no connection. That's what the genitive absolute is anyway. There's no grammatical connection, so I just always put that kind of line, and there's no connection, grammatical connection. So that's my diagram. It doesn't have to be your diagram. Okay. I like to start with it, and it was very interesting in this particular passage how the fact that the diagram kept getting changed with term analysis, and sometimes the term analysis had to be readjusted based on not able to make a diagram work grammatically. Okay. So that was all an interesting passage to look at. Okay. So So that's that part of it. Carry us forward.
So we're looking, those are the foundational steps, right?
Yeah, right, but we need to work through that and then begin the integration process, right?
Right.
Okay.
So we've looked at diagram. Do we need to start working on the term analysis part now, or how do you want to?
You're the leader.
I mean, how far do you want to go tonight?
Oh, we'll go as far as we can.
I mean, what work do you want to do as far as the whole weekend and stuff? I mean, do you want to actually get into working the term analysis, or
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's the only way you're going to be able to figure out what we need to integrate and how to do that. Okay.
So kind of how we did it before. Start with the first word that we come to and go from there.
Okay.
So, let's see. I think last time we just kind of went around and
Sure, that's fine.
worked on it. So, first word would be party. Who wants to start with that? Or do you want me to start?
You can start.
Oh. So that would be conjunction, right? And it's conjunction of you have to decide whether it's a first off subordinate or
Yeah, right. I know what kind of conjunction it is. It's two kinds, basically two kinds, right? Either independent, introduces an independent idea or a subordinate idea, right? Well, how do you, generally speaking, this is a subordinate idea? Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so based on the diagram that we were looking at that we also came up with, would you say that it would be looking back at what was that, verse
17, Kraton. So what you're doing is trying to figure out how it connects up with the context, right? How does it translate it? That's the first, maybe the first thing. Because it could go different ways of translation. You could translate how do you that, or because, right? Which way would you think it might want to go? That, it would be an object clause of some sort, and you would wonder, well, what's the object of? So you have to read the context. Yeah, right? I mean, well, just take a stab. We can all stab at it.
I think it's that because it's better to suffer for doing good. God wills, or if it is of the will of God, to suffer for doing good.
It's better doing good if the will of God.
I'm going to change it to because.
Okay. It's suffer than to do bad. And then you're going to say it's probably more causal then, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's a cause. And then the next question which you asked for was, well, what's the connection, contextual connection there? And so then you'd have to go back into the preceding context to see, in fact, why because here, because of what, So you have to ask. So now you'd have to go back and at least include 17 into the context, at least. just so that you wouldn't have to do necessarily term analysis with everything maybe, but at least that's part of the context because it starts with a subordinate clause, right? So what's the main idea? I guess that's what you have to ask.
Right. It seems to be answering the question of why is it better to suffer?
Yeah, well, that seems to me to be the only thing I can find anything I can come up. Why is it better to suffer for doing good rather than doing bad?
Right. What's the justification for suffering that way? For putting up with it?
Yeah. So at any rate, that's kind of what you have to do with that, right initially with that word, just to connect it up to context, right? And have some reason, make some statement as to why, what it connects to, what is the cause of what. You have to say that somewhere along the line. Okay. Good.
So, yeah. I think we have it, down at it's linked to verse 17 there.
Well, I mean, I did, but you may or may not agree with me. I think it goes back further or whatever. At this stage, you might want to re-look over some of those outlines to see if they've given you any indication of how it connects up. Now, all of us call this some sort of a vindication of Christ here.
Well, the promise of vindication is the main, what he's saying is the main idea of the section that it's in, so I think that's what he's trying to say is that, because he's got suffering for doing good, which is 13 through 17, then he's got vindication of Christ, so is it saying that for the vindication of the believer for Christ, from Christ, and maybe that's what he's trying to say.
I'm not sure what he's trying to say. Now, my outline, it was keyed off of the better to suffer for doing good than doing bad. And then whether or not I maintain that or not, it's a question, but saw that then as a reason for if that's God's will, there's a reason for it.
Right.
Some sort of purpose. Okay. Before we move on, however, I just noted something in my notes. Noticing the layout of the text. If you have a Nessalon, I don't recall how the other one is laid out, but mine's laid out as if it was some sort of poetic situation here. Okay, in the Nessalon text doesn't show up. Well, it may show up that way in the Bronx. I'm not sure. I don't know if it does it. Yeah. So there's a question that is there, and I just wanted more information on that, and therefore I kind of looked at a commentary or two on this, and Long and Lee, their commentary says in this passage, I just noted, this passage, of course, the most difficult in the entire Bible. It didn't help me with why in the world the thing may be laid out in poetry, other than I couldn't find any source for that. Now, maybe there is some, but I couldn't find it. But I was kind of intrigued by their statement there. Okay. I don't know about that. Without question, I think there's a lot of difficult passages. But this is tough.
UBS doesn't have it.
Yeah, right.
It's just as a normal.
Right. Okay, so you did the conjunction. And so I stated why I felt in my notes, so that I don't want, when we do a study, we just don't want to have wonderful thoughts that we just think and don't write down, because later on we're not going to be able to think the same thoughts. So my thought there was, well, contextual connections establish why it's better to suffer for doing good than for doing wrong. And the diagram affected my diagram, so I just connected the diagram. Okay, next. I'm not going to show you mine, Mike, until you're on your own. You're on Kai.
So, what's the first thing we need to establish with it?
What book you got there, Mike? Which one is that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, well, okay. So the first thing we need to do is what, Mike? With the word.
Establish the part of speech.
Okay, parts of the thing, whatever. What is it? Yeah, right. Okay. And then secondly,
parse it and then do the exegesis on it.
the syntax of it, how it connects to the context. Okay, so what part of speech do you think it is? You're searching it out. That's what.
Conjunction.
Okay, basically it's a conjunction, right?
But when you look at, what's it's a conjunction? Okay, it's going to connect. Where would it go?
Well, how did you translate it?
Yeah, when I translated it, initially I said that, but I changed my mind.
Oh, you mean copy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree now that it's because
Okay, but we're on Kai now.
Oh, I understand that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because Christ also suffered once.
Oh, okay. So you translated also.
Also.
Okay, so what kind of function is that then? And then you want to validate, see if that continues to hold.
So that would be my next step.
Yeah.
Working this through.
Okay. Right.
Unless somebody wanted to say even, because even Christ suffered circumcision.
Well, even could be also or even. Then the question there comes up: is that a standard conjunctive syntax?
Right.
Or is it adverbial?
Okay.
See what I'm saying? In other words, is it a conjunction in the sense of connecting clauses or words or phrases, or is it really modifying the verbal dimension of the sentence, the predicate?
Yeah, that's what I think it is. I think it's involved with.
So then that would affect your diagram, so make sure that wherever you have it put, that it connects. See, mine, where do I have it? See, I have it here underneath the verb. See Kai here? I have it. So it's functioning adverbially there in my diagram. I wouldn't know where to put it or what to do with it as a conjunction functioning as a connective of some sort. See? Which I think you probably feel the same way. Obviously, you translate that way. So the point is, it just has to show up on the diagram as adverbial at that point, and then you just want to validate the possibility that it can function adverbially. Of course, after a while, you need to know some of these words more well. Go ahead.
I had put it here as an emphatic. But I had it associated with Christ, Christos, Christ also. But maybe I'm mixing up my, or because even Christ or Christ also, it's emphatic on Christ.
Yeah, well, that's a possibility.
Could that work too?
If that's the case, then you'd have to validate that it can function to emphasize or to function as a almost adjective.
Yeah. Right.
And then if that was the case and it worked, then you would put it over here.
That's where it is, yeah. There. And that work.
How would you translate that?
Well, he translated it apparently then,
right.
because even Christ.
Right.
Then you have, but then what does that imply?
Yeah, someone else may have too.
Well, that implies that
Everybody's understanding.
the preceding context suggests the same thing that's happening with Christ.
Right. Okay.
And maybe that's true. Okay. So it's just another. That's a valid.
Is it almost one of those ones where it could go either way? If it's the same, I'm not sure that we're
very similar semantically.
Yeah.
And if it was very similar semantically, you would want to just see where the primary function of chi would be when it's not functioning conjunctively.
I mean, can chi, I've forgotten if chi can function adjectively like that.
Well, there's only 5 columns of chi in our PDE.
And you're saying I could probably find it adjectively somewhere in there?
Yeah, it can hide in that.
Okay.
No, I'm sure it can. Okay, anything else you want to do with that word there, Mike?
No, I think we covered it.
Anybody else want to do anything else with that word? Actually, you're looking at the wrong text to be able to know. There's a textual problem with see, you would know that from looking at your drawings there. Or that, you have to look at. That's why we use, again, just to remind you, that's why we use Nestle long text. It has more textual problems noted, right? There's more of them than the other.
You know what's crazy about LeBron's? I actually have the Novum Testamentum Grace apparatus, and I can't read Latin.
Oh,
it's all in Latin.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's all. I've got that stuff in there, but it's like, why would they give us that one and not one?
Did they make the fact that it had a note on it like this here?
Yeah.
You see this? It had a different word involved. Okay.
It's there. I just can't.
Okay.
It's all in Latin.
So get a Bible.
Yeah.
Now, in relationship to your preceding discussion or question about chi, okay, noting the fact that it had this substitution word in there in a few manuscripts, you note that? See? Somebody else also had the same question as to how chi fit, right? And in its place, P72, in its place, it put the article ha instead, so you would not read because also Christ, but the article would be there, but the Christ, right? And then another a couple of them put chi ha. In other words, there's an inflation or conflation there. Chi and putting both in there, right? Obviously that's secondary. Both of those are secondary. But then you have to have some explanation as to why, in fact, the questions arose with that word. And so the exchange, I particularly noted, the exchange probably considers chi needless and the article necessary for a proper name. Well, probably in this instance, necessary for a proper name. In addition to the article by one minuscule and few others, an admission of Chi by a few others can be accounted for on the same basis. Of course, externally, we would keep that as manuscript support. We would keep the text. But it is interesting to note that your question was raised by some ancient scribes, right? And they changed the text to deal with that, right? So at least...
Metzger doesn't deal with it, though.
No, because it's not in the UBS.
Oh, he's only UBS.
Yeah, most of it. Just use the UBS. And that's because it doesn't affect the translator's work, okay, very much. So that's one thing that should have to be done. Okay, knowing there's a textual problem, okay, deal with the textual problem. Okay.
So you don't have it then on your computer, you can see it in your text.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The computer, my copy of the Bronx NA27 doesn't put that in there. It does in yours though?
Well, no, they have it in there, but it's in Latin.
Oh, there's a Novum Testamentum Grace critical apparatus, but it's on. There's no. You got to go read Latin to get it.
I'm talking about.
See the apparatus right there? Yeah.
Apparatus.
It's a Tishner, but it's all.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So we're going to first Peter 3:18.
Oh. Did I misread that?
Yeah.
I think it was Peter 3:18. Yes, we had miscued it somewhere along the line.
It must not be indexed. Oh, your index right now isn't on the Bible verse. It's on the.
Oh, it's on critical apparatus.
No, you have to go to active index, which is that little one to the left, one more, that one. Put that and then go Bible, and then go First Peter.
Yeah.
You guys gonna be doing another?
Okay.
I'm supposed to be getting set up, so we should be So, yeah, it's all there.
It is.
What is that? Aren't you going through a
What?
indoctrination course?
No, we kind of started an informal user group just for like seminary and people who want to practice it and talk with it. Yeah. Find out different ways of using it and question.
Okay, but if you have this,
You can actually read it either. Which is real helpful.
Yeah.
Or I could learn Latin real quick.
Well, actually, that was one of the commentary section anyway, so I can do most of that.
Really?
Okay, so
That's the next language on my list.
okay, so Kai, next word then.
That'd be me.
Yeah.
We got Christos. Bible here. So that obviously is going to be the subject. So I just put it on a subject line, and then of course I put on my diagram. I put it with Kai. I just left them together because I probably should put it under Christ, but to me it just they're kind of conjoined there. Anyway, but it's the subject of supper.
First one. You got to parse it first.
Yeah, masculine, noun, singular. And so it would be the subject of the clause. And so that's its function as the subject of the clause. And there's the chi with it, and the verb is at the end there, to suffer. So I've got Christ in between chi and suffering.
Okay. Is that it? Is that all I see there?
Well.
Okay, well, we need to sensitize you to something then. One thing you always need to be sensitive to, is the issue of word order. Okay, good. Okay. The typical word order in a basic Greek sentence would put the start with a verb, the focal point being a verb, right? Here, the verb is thrown to the end of the clause. And we got the subject pulled forward, okay, which could tend to validate your chi being connected to Christ. It's a focus issue there, right? That could tend to validate that. Obviousobviously, pulled forward as we just looked at sentence, pulled first line there. Everything's pulled forward in a verb. So there's a focus there on Christ once for all concerning sins. Right? So there's a focal issue. Okay. Also, another thing that our textual problem pointed out was on chi was that some people put in an article there, right? Right? Well, if we reject the change, then we've got Christ in Arthurus. Is that significant? It may or may not be. It's a question. Is it significant? Right? This may relate to some degree even with your historical study. Sometimes Christ, that is the word Christ, sometimes focuses upon the proper name of the person. And sometimes it focuses upon the messianic concepts. Messiah, anointed. Right? In our edited text, which these are edited, okay, Vanessa along, if they felt that it's focusing upon the person, they capitalized the key, which they did here. If they felt that it's focusing upon the anointed one, with a focus on Messiah, if you will, then usually has a small key. But anyway, it becomes an article, right? So there's no article. You have the conclusion. My conclusion is it relates to Christ as a proper name, and it doesn't need an article. And particularly, and this is where again the issue of historical background and maybe previous knowledge occurs. Higher literary quality works, you don't very often your use of the article is much more sparing than in the less literary quality works. Yeah, Mike?
You say that it's referential because Christ is spoken out in 15 and 16.
Well, there's no definite article. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
If there was a definite article there, then it could be a previous reference definite article to pull that into this context. So we're using.
So is the article required in order for it to be referential?
No. The question, the issue is the context clear enough that we're talking about the same Christ that we just previously talked about? Right. So you don't need that. for that if the context is clear. If it was a possibility of some lack of clarity, as in verse 15, for instance, okay, the Christ you have there, right? To be sanctified, to define, to define the particular person, and that could then be previous reference to a previous use there to make sure if you just think quite a while since he's used the term. So, but you wouldn't have there's no such thing as a previous reference non-article. There. There's a previous reference used of the article, but not of a non-article. In other words, you don't not use an article so that you can connect the word to a preceding. You use the article to do that, but you don't need it for a proper name. That's it. Higher literary quality works very often doesn't overwork the article. And then I just note here it's forward emphasis, just to keep that thought, just to keep that perspective in mind, because the emphasis, as you follow through varying emphasis, you begin to get a feel for what's the focus of this thing. And so you're not putting all your emphasis upon a secondary focus of the author. Okay? Well, I'll take one. That's the next one. Hapax, adverb. What kind of an adverb? Well, I take it as an adverb of degree once for all. VDAG, it mentions that. So that's just my reference point because I looked it up just to see what all the possibilities were. I landed on this one. Okay. And then the forward position as well as the allusion to the cross. That's the whole phrase, allusion to the cross. Justifies a unique idea, and that's once for all being a unique idea, and that's kind of comes out of VDAG to some degree.
Once not just numerically, but once inclusively, or globally or universally.
Or unique in the sense of something that is non-repeatable, just one of a kind. The cross was one of a kind, and a lot of people could be crucified, but the crucifixion never was repeated for emphasis and meaning of it all. And that's where VDAG kind of was focusing his attention on that idea. So, all right. Good morning.
Is that all we need to do?
Yeah, well, I don't see anything. Do you see anything else that needs to be done there? I didn't see anything further that needed to be done.
So we have, what is it? Position? In terms of receiving. Let's see. How many I say? These are the with the gender. On behalf of.
Did you ever get a copy of the prepositional uses that I had broken down? You don't need to have it.
I have it. I forgot once. I have the syntax with all that.
In other words, the preposition
all
free in the genitive is used to narrow down the possibilities of the genitive uses, right?
Right.
And so, I wondered if you had a copy of that, or you use that, or how do you go about doing that?
Usually I would look it up in there's the list of all the stuff in the back. And use that for reference.
The walls you're talking about?
Yeah,
Walls have it.
I think Mark has it copied on the,
Yeah.
it's got a huge list of.
I suppose you could go through BDB and work through all that too, or
there's
GDA, but. Right, okay. So then you translated it out?
On behalf of, or no, it's not on behalf of.
On behalf of, meaning like in the interest of, for the benefit of?
Yeah.
No,
I don't think that's right.
Sins? No. Let's go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's got to be. Concerning in reference to.
Reference, advantage wouldn't be for the benefit of sins here, or for the purpose of, probably. But then you only got this other genitive reference, and so that this translates.
Yeah, the
concerning about something like that. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Like you said, it's well. Actually, is that one pushed forward, or is it that in its normal?
The modifiers
Right.
come back to the verb.
Okay. So that it's pushed forward for some reason.
Yeah, right. Well, you don't have a right Bible there, but if you did, you'd find out that there's a textual problem here too. But the textual problem goes all the way to Peri Hamartion Epasen. It's a textual problem there. Okay? In other words, it involves that whole clause or phrase. Okay?
Oh, wait.
Huh?
Yeah, the whole. I think it has it in here. Peri Hamartion. Peri Hamartion Kuper Kumon.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's got that.
So there's a number of varying readings that are possibilities there. They change, they have all kinds of different readings there, don't they? Now, when it comes down to a phrase a textual problem that involves a whole phrase like that, you can deal with it right on top, right at the beginning, or my technical pattern would be to go through the syntax of what I got and then deal with it so I got the whole phrase. Okay? See what I'm saying? So I deal with the textual problem as a whole at the end rather than the beginning as a whole phrase. That's how I deal with it. Okay. So what's next? Mardion? Okay. Mike.
L. Feminine, plural, genitive. Sins. It's the object of the preposition.
Okay.
Concerning sins.
Anything else?
Indefinite.
Indefinite. Okay.
Arthurus.
Okay. And then so just for reference point, what would be the difference of no article as opposed to an article? What would be the focus if it had an article, and therefore it doesn't have one, obviously, so.
The article, I think, would suggest something specific.
Yeah. Well, the article identifies, doesn't it?
Identifies or
Something specific. So the author would be thinking in definite terms, of particular sins, perhaps.
Yeah.
Right?
Sins of idolatry or.
Yeah, right. In this instance, he doesn't have an article, right? So he's not thinking in particular sins, but sins in general, if you will, right? And then when we look at the whole phrase, Christ suffered for, did he suffer for all sins or just particular sins? You know what I'm saying? So the fact that it's an article makes good theological sense here. So that it surprises you. Okay.
Okay. A third next. That's a third singular Aristotle indicative. And it means to suffer. So this would be translated suffered. And that would be an aorist. I would call that an aorist of, I call that a functioning in Wallace, I think Wallace calls it
What?
Wallace calls it the consummative.
Consummated?
Yeah.
Now with a focus on consummated focuses upon the end of it, right? As opposed to the beginning of it, right? Or the whole.
Right.
So then we would have a translation that would differ, perhaps.
Well, let's see. What would the translation differ from what?
Well, the aorist, generally speaking, the aorist has three primary, then some secondary kind of uses. One would be just a reference to the act or the event without emphasis upon the beginning or the end.
Right.
Another one would be, of course, emphasize the beginning, ingressive idea, begin to do something. Or the end, looking at the end product of something, has, and the translations would be a little different. If in the ingressive idea it would be, and he, concerning sins, he began to suffer. Right? I would probably write that down. How would you translate it? The focus was on, let's say, the cross, let's say, right? So you would translate it simply maybe something like, he has suffered. Which almost comes into the perfected kind of idea almost. Or if you can't prove that or didn't like that, then you just simply say with the concept, whatever we call culminated, okay, or the summary errors, just simply he suffered. Right?
And also the constitutive.
There's all kinds of different names for the same thing. Yeah, right. Yeah. See,
Does the adverb help you define the nature of errors?
well, it could.
Adverbs would be great.
It could. Mm-hmm. But also, then there's potentially a theological issue that could crop up. Right? I mean, what theological issue could crop up?
Was it his death or his suffering that produced the death?
Well,
Once for all concerning sin. I mean, I think some versions change it from suffering to died or something like that. I remember seeing that somewhere.
Yeah, NAS has died.
died.
So.
Well, the thing I'm getting at in that is, and maybe again then just this sensitivity to the theological aspects, some would suggest that Christ's atonement and suffering was not just the cross event, but his whole life in a sense. His whole incarnate life was involved with that. Okay? So maybe there's a theological dimension there that you would want to consider. Okay? The bottom line is, if you can't contextually narrow it down, okay, then you're best off to keep it just general, if you will. Okay, right? Okay. Now, my conclusion, which may or may not be accurate, of course, from your point of view, is that it's culminated the way you did it. But I think I can demonstrate in the context that the focus is more upon the cross aspect than it is on his whole existence and life, by the very context here, having put to death in the flesh, and then they lie in the spirit in which he then functioned. So it appears that it looks at that end part of his suffering as opposed to just suffering as his whole life, atoning life, if you will.
So the rest of that is almost like an exegetical. The rest of that is like an exegetical.
Yeah, right. And that's again where the ability to have the Greek context before you so you can scan it without having to work it.
Yeah.
If you follow me. Can provide for you some support for your conclusions, even on things like this. I could probably change this to has suffered. And get that across better. Now, the textual problem, which none of you have, but you need a real Bible for it. Just kidding. And what I did is look at it all, but then I checked Metzger out on this, see what he had to say, and say, well, his comments are probably better than what I could say. Okay. But then I noticed in commentaries as well, Vaughn and Lee talked about this textual problem as well. But at any rate, he explains that while acknowledging the difficulty of ascertaining original text, the majority of the committee preferred the reading as we have in the text because this verb is in favor of the author. There's that stylistic emphasis on this, if you recall the methodology that's involved here. And it says it occurs elsewhere in 1 Peter 11 times. Just kind of carries some weight there. Carries on the thought of verse 17. Whereas the other option, to die after, occurs nowhere else in the epistle, abruptly introduces new idea. Okay. In view of the present expression concerning sin, scribes were more likely to substitute died for suffered than vice versa. So that would be the harder reading, would be to suffer as opposed to die. Just the fact that we shows that, I think. And see, the readings with Hamon or Numon, which is another part of this. We insert some of that. And some of the readings, they agree to the same pronunciation and actually the expected scribal expansions for our sin that we never referred to. Kind of thing for expansion, especially in the lectionaries and stuff. Okay. So anyway, that's where I would put typically where I would deal with the textual problem that involves a number of words. And some statement as to why I'm agreeing with or changing the text. And Metzger had a good summary, and I could, since he and I have basically the same kind of theory of textual criticism, it makes it simpler to me. But, all right. Oh, that was you, wasn't it? Did you do that one?
Yeah, that's one. All right. So, you guys could have tricked me into doing another one.
You want to?
Did you just do that one?
That's what
Oh, yeah, you did do that.
I guess.
So then,
Unless you want to do.
no, I'll do one. Part of it.
Okay, well then go ahead.
Suffered.
Yeah.
Next words and adjective, masculine noun with a singular, substantival, apposition to Christoph above. The righteous one. Now, I did not initially have that way in my diagram. Okay? In fact, when I had to go back and read up my diagram over again. How in the world, where in the world does this fit? Ultimately, I had to go back and accomplish part of my diagram. So if you recall the diagram, I put an apposition of Christ here. Christ the righteous. So it's part of the subject then. Okay? In the diagram. And that's as far as I need to go. There's no textual problem on that one. Except, well, I take that back. There is, but it involves the next phrase, righteous for the unrighteous. And one of the, in fact, I forgot to put my little note on there. How did I miss that? At any rate, it eliminates, some of the manuscripts eliminates that whole phrase. P, and only one manuscript, C, eliminates the phrase. Right? Probably a mistake, scribe, obviously, scribe letter there.
Any chance of the righteous one?
The righteous one has a substantival.
Okay, so that's how you would. That's how you justify it. Okay, I see.
Otherwise, you translate it as an adjective. You translate it how? When you put it together, you say, righteous Christ suffered. Well, that's okay. It just seems pretty awkward, right? Especially in light of the placement of it so far removed from Christ. Right? And the adjective, proper adjective. Okay. All right.
Let's start with another preposition. Let's see. This one is also used with the genitive, and this one is on behalf.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's a different one.
Yeah. It's what else? Genitive. What's that? Reference. No.
Well, that's where you need your list somewhere along the line to help you out. Genitive of reference, genitive of advantage. For in the interest, for the benefit. Righteous for the benefit of unrighteous. That work. And again, it's a close semantic. The semantics are pretty close for genitive reference or advantage in this instance. They're pretty close. Righteous concerning the unrighteous, but if you can
link it, it would probably be because it's saying that one's concerning sins suffered, the righteous on behalf of the. It seems like the advantage would be a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I think you can justify that without any problem. Yeah, you can justify that. And that's of course, the key when you make syntactic statements, can we justify it from the text somehow? And we can justify it in the residence word.
Yeah.
Okay. Score. Go ahead.
I think we're
Just about.
reference on that one.
Yeah, right. We're finished with that one.
So.
I get the conjunction here?
No. Adjective.
Is that an adjective?
Well, see, if there's a question, then you go to BDAG or dictionary to figure out what it is, you know.
It is gender plural something. And I'm going to say feminine because it uses seeing Ikea. That is now.
Depends how we put it in the night, or how you see it.
Well,
Just on behalf of the unjust.
Because it's in that phrase.
yeah, well, what are you saying here now?
Well, we're trying to decide if it's an adjective or a noun, and
Yeah,
it depends on how you see it in your. If you look at it in the background, you say, well, it's part of that subordinate, not subordinate, but appositional phrase.
yeah, it was part of that, to be sure, yeah.
Well, Vida gives it as an adjective.
Right? Mm-hmm. But it can function substantively.
Yeah, and of course there's no article.
No, that's right. There's no article. It's an adjective. Function substantively, which I didn't write that in, but I translated unrighteous one, which is a substantive function of that. Okay. And smartness, definiteness, I put, okay, without defining any particular unrighteous ones, just unrighteous, generally speaking.
That's interesting, yeah, because you mentioned it, when we translate it, we would say the just on behalf of the unjust.
Mm-hmm.
So we would translate the article even though it's not in the text.
Yeah, well, that's very often in English. The English article doesn't agree with it, or we use it, Greek often doesn't, and where the Greek uses it, English often doesn't, and it just confusing to deal with the article. Okay? Good. I don't, other than fix the problem, this is a non-problem. Okay?
So I'm going to him. It starts a conjunction. It's going to start a purpose clause. It's subordinate to clause we've been working on. So we're going to start a new clause, and that's going to be adverbial. I'm going to have it come off of. I'm going to take that off of suffering.
Okay,
Christ suffered.
Okay, suffered.
So
As purpose then?
Yeah, purpose.
Okay.
And do we have any issues there? No.
There's no textual problem there.
Yeah, no. At least not necessarily.
No, now there is the next word though.
Yeah, there is a next word, right.
My word, personal pronoun, masculine, accusative, plural, accusative, direct object, which is pretty clear. Antecedent is the readers, you, forward emphasis, usually it's pulled in front of the verb. Then there's a variant reading. Metzger again says copies are more likely to alter the second person to the first as more inclusive and vice versa. In other words, instead of you, put us. Matter of fact, that makes Jude a harder reading, and there's a lot of things you could say about that. When you talk about Christ's sacrifice just for the unjust, that He might bring all of us, not just the readers, right? The harder reading would be the text, the manuscript evidence would support the text better, so we wouldn't change that. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, that's far as we need to go there, I think.
Our verb. Active verb.
Well, back to our paradigms.
Yeah, it's singular. Subjunctive.
Yeah, subjunctive.
So, what's that? What's the, I can't remember what it's called, the aorist and future aorist. That weird, I don't know what.
Future aorist?
Can't remember what.
Well, now it's a subjunctive, and so on doing term analysis, the primary thing we need to deal with is a subjunctive first. Of course, that's subjunctive because it's in a purpose clause. Okay, then you have aorist, then you deal with aorist. But all subjunctives are futuristic. They all are potential. Okay. So then you would deal with the aorist itself. Right? So you start with your three basic views. Okay.
It can't be, because it's that subjunctive idea, would it be pretty hard to have it as a might begin to
Ingressive idea, so that he might, would that make any sense?
He might be beginning.
He suffered so that he might begin to bring you to God.
I don't think that makes a whole lot of sense in my head. I don't know, because is that what he's trying to say there? Like that the act that Christ did up here, suffering, begins to bring us to God, or does it?
Now you're in a theological question,
yeah.
Right? So now you want to go to a theological commentary that is a commentary that deals with theology to see if or if you can't see the emphasis on the beginning aspects of this, right, or the end aspects, then you just simply stick with the constitutive or what some call a summary. Just a statement.
Yeah.
The purpose to bring us to God, to bring you to God. So that's the question. Can you contextually justify the beginning stages of this, or is it just a statement of his sacrificial purpose?
I would lean that way. I think that's what it's. I don't see the focus on there.
Well, then that's where we go. Yeah. Okay. Now, in mind, looking at that particular word, I just wanted to, and that's where I agree with that. Because the term wasn't very common. In other words, that particular term, that verb, wasn't all that common, so I just looked it up and find it was only used in a couple of places. Right? Luke and Acts. So it's just a little bit of a rare word as far as this is concerned. So just a note to myself, If I bother to look it up, why not put my information down? And also, of course, Luke, Acts, these are other two books of the New Testament that are also in literary style, high up in the literary quality, just like First Peter here. And so, might be significant, maybe yes, maybe no. Okay, well, our time is up. Okay. So that's it for tonight. But we haven't even got to the good stuff yet. But, so we've interacted with the reading, the history, we got ourselves started. We've interwoven a few issues of frequent steps that occur, that are obvious occur, there won't be many more that will occur. Right, and then so far there's been quite a few, though you guys didn't have 1, 2, 3. Already there have been 4, just as half a verse and 4 textual problems that occurred here. And half a verse. And there's a few more to go in this verse. Okay. So we know there's textual issues that are going to crop up. Okay. But there's also going to be other issues that are going to crop up too, I'm afraid. So we'll continue on and see what we can do, and hopefully we'll be able to come to some significant exegetical conclusions and even finalize this by the end of the weekend. That'll be very good. Okay, so you helped us out tonight. I'm going to ask Mark to help us out tomorrow. All right, Mark. So start where we left off here, Mark.
So are we going to keep term analysis and diagram until we get to build type?
Is that what you typically will do? And that's what we need to do.
Right.
Okay. And just keep in mind that as we move through this, I ask maybe more questions. I ask the text maybe more questions than you're asking. Okay. Well, that's only because I've been doing it longer. Okay. And I'll press you when there needs to be. But really, some of this we can move a lot faster than we can. In other words, like the Hina clause. Okay, so that's perfect. So does anybody have any disagreement about no? Let's move on. You can do that a lot quicker. Okay, we can do that a lot quicker, I think, until we get hung up on something. There'll be enough places to get hung up on. Okay, so if we're not in disagreement and whatever, then let's just keep moving, right? And sometimes what happens is you make a decision at one point and you work on later on and say something later on triggers rethinking of what happened before. And you go back and rethink that through. Sometimes that occurs. Okay. And so you're not going to, by moving a little faster through this, we won't be missing out on anything. And we won't miss out on anything. Keep the data down. Okay. Well, let's call it quits, I think.